Hello everyone, welcome to round 4 of the Doeberl Cup for Robbie Chess. I'm going to go over how I went. If you remember how I went before, I had a loss in round 1, a draw in round 2, and I managed to get a win in round 3. So I'm on 1.5 out of 3. This is the 4th round, which was the second game of the day. And I am the black pieces in this game. So let's see how I did in round 4. Okay, my opponent played King Pawn, and I decided to just play a Hui Li. So very standard opening for black. Followed, this is all theory so far. Developing my knight, attacking the pawn, castles, bishop e7. Now you can take the pawn, however when white moves the rook over and lines it up on this e-file, you have to move the knight, and then white gets the pawn back, normally the e-pawn. So it is possible, it's not losing or anything, but I decided to play what's called a closed Hui Li. So this is all standard theory. Okay, except now this point's where I decided to play what's called a martial attack. This move was sprung as an opening surprise by a famous chess player called Frank Marshall against one of the ex-world champions. So it's an attacking opening, I give up a pawn, but as black you're trying to get the attack going instead of playing a defensive game. So accepts the gambit, you can see take, take, take. It's still theory up to here. The next move is, the correct move is to protect your knight in the center. So what have I gained for my pawn? You can see I'm down a pawn. I've got my knight in a really good spot. Look, let's compare the pieces, right? My knight's centralized, defended. My opponent's knight's on its starting square. I've got a bishop which will quickly come to this d6 square and be in a very active position, looking at both sides of the board. I've got a bishop that can come out. It's free to develop. I've got rooks that are free to come out. My queen's free to come out once my bishop moves. So I've lost a pawn, but I've gained a lot of activity. You can see the arrows going everywhere. My opponent, the knight's trapped in by its pawns. The bishop's also trapped in by its pawns. This rook's free, so that's good. But if this knight and bishop are trapped, this means the rook's trapped. So these three pieces compensate, the position of these three pieces compensate for me being down a pawn. So I'm not winning or anything, it's just an even trade. I've lost a pawn, but I've gained development. So in chess, it's important to think about trades. It's not always about material. You might give up a pawn or a piece for an attack, or some development, or even a positional concession. So, but the important thing is when you're down in material, and you've got this is what's called a temporary situation. So I've given up a pawn, permanent, can't get the pawn back, for a temporary situation for my opponent. So if I did nothing for the next 4 moves, I move my king back and forth, my opponent plays d4, develops a knight out, develops a bishop out, up a pawn for nothing. So it's very important that when I've given up a pawn, the next few moves have become critical. You'll see I try and capitalize on my lead in development. So my opponent plays d3. Again, look, 2 more moves. If he gets a knight to f3, for example, he's up a free pawn. So I develop with tempo, forcing him to move the rook, develop again with the bishop, attacking the pawn, and preventing the knight coming out. So my opponent would like to play the knight out, but I can take the pawn. So I'm trying to restrict my opponent's untanglement of his pieces. Queen f3. Now I must admit, this is where I ran out of theory. I couldn't remember past here, and I played a move that's not the best move. It's still okay, but it makes it a bit harder for me. So my opponent takes the knight. It's a strong knight in the center, and he wants to damage my pawn structure. So takes. Notice the queen can't take another pawn because bishop would take check and I'd win the queen. So it's indirectly defended, but saying that it is still a weak pawn. There's no other pawns that can defend it. So I have to keep an eye on it. So my opponent decides to swap off. His goal is to swap off the pieces, and then have a extra pawn. So I decided to swap it off and take the pawn back. So he's given back his material. So now material is even. The knight's still undeveloped, so again I have a short-term advantage by the knight being undeveloped. But he has, again, a long-term advantage of I have a weak pawn, in that it's isolated, and he has a very good pawn structure. So see how we're balancing short-term and long-term. Long-term, this is better for him, but short-term, I've got a bit of development to balance it out. So he plays the knight out, not letting me swap bishop for knight. I develop my rook, and he decides to try and double up on the e-file. So I move my bishop out of harm's way, defending everything, and thinking I want to plan to maybe bring the pawn up and bring the bishop back here, if I had to defend my weak pawn. That's pretty much my only weakness in the game, is that pawn. My king's pretty safe, my bishop's very good at defending, so I really got to take care of this guy. He doubles. I continue with my plan. This move here, I decided is also a good idea because I have a light squared bishop, and my pawns are all on light squares, so that's not normally a good idea because you want your bishop and pawns working in harmony. So when I've got a pawn on a dark square covering the dark squares, my bishop covers the light squares. So you can see how if I remove all this, I've got coverage across the whole section there. Whereas with pawns on light squares and bishops on light squares, I've got those squares covered, but there's all these holes. There's other holes here. So I want to try and get my pawns on dark squares. That's a side note. So it's a little tip for you guys. He develops a knight. So he's got a really good square for his knight in the center here, which can't be captured by my bishop and can't be chased away by a pawn. He also has ideas of bringing the knight in here if he wants potentially attacking if I move my rook, my queen and my pawn. So this position I felt slightly uncomfortable in. If you look at the computer, it's even, maybe slight advantage to white, but it's very uncomfortable to play. I decided that I couldn't allow him to swap all the rooks off, get the knight to the center. This is what it would look like. So if I say I played a move that I was thinking about, if I swapped it all off, for example, take with a bishop. If we get this position, it actually looks like it's even, but it's starting to get a bit scary for me. He can bring knights in, attacking the pawn. His queen's got access to come in if I move away too far. The queen and knight can actually combine against my king. Queen and knight are preferable to queen and bishop because knights can cover both coloured squares, whereas this bishop's only got one square. So I felt like I'd be defending a long drawn out game. For example, something like this potentially could have happened. And even if he takes, he's got his queen in. I know I can defend, but then you've got to move like this. And you can show the materials are even, but because I've got weaknesses here and here, it's very hard for me to defend. I can, both of them and everything. I can, try and go for a checkmate or something, but that's easily countered. Either by this one or this one. So my hope would be to try and counter-attack and go for some sort of perpetual check. But he would be on the attack because this is even getting taken as check. So after knight b3, I thought for like 20 minutes and I came up with rook e4. Decided that this was a good move. It blunts his domination on this e-file. If he takes the pawn, then takes the rook, then I can take with the pawn, correcting my pawn structure. So I no longer have a weak pawn over here. And in correcting my pawn structure, I've also blocked off these rooks on the e-file. So he'd love to go take this open file, but my queen defends it. So next move I can bring my rook across and actually get control of the center and I fix that pawn structure. So that would be in my favor. And then I was looking at all sorts of lines, like if he tries to move the queen back, I could, I've got active moves. For example, queen has to go somewhere not there because look, bishop in, and I want to win a pawn. So my opponent would, probably have to go something like queen here, and then once he does that, I was planning to bring my other rook over, and it's a pretty balanced position. We've both got the e-file, we both can't really make progress. Yeah, I've got slight weaknesses, but a knight alone jumping in for example, jumping in here thinking, look, I'll fork these two. I've always got moves like take, and the good thing is that this bishop defends the rook, so there's no sneaky checks because I can always capture back, and then if he takes my rook, I get the bishop, and I'm actually a piece up. So everything's defended, everything works out for me. But my best hope in this position is actually a draw. There's not much chance to win. So when I played this rook e4, my opponent thought for 30 minutes, and at this stage he was up on the time. He started with 90 minutes, he was at like 95 minutes. Like, he played every move instantly. He was way ahead on the clock, and it was the second round of the day, so we're both a bit tired. Yeah, but once I played this move, he then offered the draw, and I was like, well, I feel like that's a fair result. I was black against a high-rated opponent. I was honestly a bit tired, and I felt like, yeah, I couldn't really go for any winning chances in this position. The best I could get is to maybe correct my pawn structure and be slightly ahead, but there's definitely I definitely found it hard to create a winning chance. So when he offered the draw, I was like, yep, I'll take this and have an early night and get ready for tomorrow. So yeah, a bit of a boring game, but it's sometimes you need a draw in chess. You know, in the tournament position, sometimes it's good to go for a draw, and in this case, this opening, he played really well, and I played the best I could to defend, so it was a fair result. So let me know what you guys think. If you want any more other videos on different topics than my own games, let me know as well. Happy to share, or if you want to send some games in to me, I'm happy to review them from my level. I just want to get better at chess and help you guys do the same. I'll see you guys next time for round 5.